G'day guys, today we're going to take you through a semi-traditional arrow build. This is a really cool fun project you can do on rainy days like I've got today, a terrible wet weather day that I got washed out of my range from. What we're going to do is show you how to use wood from a hardware store that can be appropriate for making good hunting arrows or even target shooting arrows, as well as a little bit of equipment from an archery shop and some homemade projects you can do on days like this. So check out our little build, guys, and I hope you enjoy it. These are the tools that we're going to need to build our arrows. The first things we're going to need is our shafting. Now, I said this is a hardware store build, so you just got to find the appropriate woods. Some pines will work. What we have here today is Tasmanian oak. It's quite a heavy wood and it's ideal for using in hunting bows. Over here we have our fletching jig. Our fletching jig is a Jojan, just a nice straight fletch on it. We have a razor blade to help us clean things up like glue and to trim down bits of wood that we don't need. We also have some plastic Fletchers here. Now the plastic Fletchers I'm not going to be using, but you can use these. We have our traditional Fletchers. Now these are a feather shape with a nice pattern on them. In that bag we also have some Nocks. They're just plastic Nocks. We have two different types of glues, one for the point and one for the Nock, and this one can also be used for the fletching. We have some bodkin points here as well for the front of our arrow shafts. Now besides these items here, you're going to need an arrow spine tester just to help you get matched weights in your arrow shafts, and you're also going to need a couple of other hand tools, things like sandpaper, and you're also going to need a saw and maybe a tapering point or a Stanley knife. The first things that we want to do after we get home with our shafting is just quickly weigh them and spine check them. This allows us to make matched groups. So you might buy 6 or 7 shafts and you might have to throw away or put aside 2 or 3 of them just because their spines don't match closely enough with the other arrows or their weights are too far out. Now we're talking maybe a 10% variance. 10 to 15% variance for a traditional bow I believe is quite safe to use, and I get quite good results with them. This is my home arrow spine tester. I've got a link in the description for how to build one of these. Really straightforward and simple. Give that a check out and that will show you what to do. Recording the spine of your shaft is quite straightforward. Simply set your shaft up on your arrow spine machine, put the weight in the dead center, measure the deflection. So we're at 25 millimeters, we put it on and it sinks down to 31.5, or we have 6.5 millimeters of deflection. Millimeters of deflection, we're looking at a relatively stiff spine. One of the ways we can change this is to simply start sanding down the shaft. Sand down the shaft in the center and towards the rear of the arrow. This will produce an FOC towards the front, and it will also weaken the spine in the middle for you to be able to use it in lower poundage bows. Alternatively, you can use different woods to achieve a softer spine with a thicker shaft. These are your options when it comes to shafting. Once you've measured all the spines for your arrows and recorded them in your book, you can pick out which shafts are going to suit to go into the full arrow building stage and discard the shafts that aren't within a 10 or 15% variance. I went ahead and cut my shafts to length for this video. Now all you have to do is use any hand tool that can cut through the wood without cracking it. So a nice sharp saw or a hacksaw, and the easiest way to do this is just to mark on a cutting bench. I'll show you what that looks like. These are my marks on the cutting bench. I have 27 to 29 inches, as well as where I cut them at 30. I cut my arrows at 30 inches because I have a 28-inch draw. It gives me a little bit of overhang on each arrow. I have at the other end, I'm using the corner of my bench to butt my arrow shaft up against, and this just prevents it from sliding off the end and me getting an inaccurate cut. The spines and weights of our arrow, and we've cut them to length and picked out the shafts that are within a 10% variance. We're on to the fun stage of putting them together and just making sure that we can add a little bit of personality to them. That's what we want to do. It's a bit of fun and they give it a really cool touch. So the first thing I did was I gave mine a coat of varnish. I actually gave them 2 coats of varnish just to weatherproof them and stop them from getting moisture in and warping them. So after you've finished that, allow enough time for the varnish to dry between coats. You can also dip them in dip tanks and give them cresting and a whole lot of other things like that. Now then we're up to the stage of adding the tapers for the Nocks and the points. We would use a taper tool to take these down to the right size for the Nocks and the points. On the point end, you want a 5-degree taper. This will allow your point to slide over the end of the shaft and be able to be glued firmly in place. The same is true for the other end, except for this one, we want an 11-degree taper and not as long. Now, I don't have a taper tool with me today, so I'm going to use the poor man's archery method of a Stanley knife. We take a little bit of wood off at a time and just keep checking with a knock and a point until they fit snugly over the end. Then we can proceed to glue them in place. You may need to revarnish some of the shaft afterwards. So all I'm doing is taking bits off the end. This is the back of my arrow, so I'm going to take off a very small amount of wood, because this is where the knock will go. What you'll get in the end is some rough squared edges that will take the end of your arrow down, and you're going to get a bit of sandpaper and twist rub it like that until it becomes a nice round circle and you can fit your knock on. End my arrow down until my bodkin point fits neatly over top. I will have to revarnish some of this just down the end where my knife is cut off. Some of the shaft that has been already varnished up. Same is true for the knock end. A little bit more needs to be taken off this end, but the knock sits on there nicely. Just a little bit more to go. The appropriate taper on both ends. Simply use some glue, super glue, specifically designed for archery use, is the best type, but any glue will do so long as it is a very strong hold. 2-part epoxy works really well. All we want to do is apply the glue to the end of our arrow and a little bit on the inside of our point in there. Put it on, twist, and let it sit for a while. And we now have knocked and ported our arrow. We are now up to fletching our arrows. This is a really cool part. We can use whatever fletchers we want. Traditional fletchers or feathers, or these synthetic man-made ones. I've got 1 cock feather, 2 normal fletchers, some Max Bond fletching glue. I have a Joe Jan fletching jig with a straight fletch clamp. Really simple. Put your knock down into the very bottom of your clamp, and then what you want to do is just have it resting up the top there, and we're ready to start fletching. Right, the first thing we want to do is set our clamp. Make sure that the edge of your clamp is free from glue. This is what your razor blade's for. We want to run the razor blade just along the edge until all the excess glue from any of your other builds has come off. The next thing we do is we're going to do the cock feather first. Put your cock feather into the clamp. Make sure it's around the right way. Really simple way of doing this is to always line your fletchers up on the table facing the right way before they go into the clamp. Put them in so they sit nice and flat. Just like that. And have it lined up with the very back of your clamp. This way, if you've got it lined up with the back of your clamp, all your feathers will be even. This has got to come back just a little bit so we can squeeze it open, push it to the end. There we go. Apply the glue to the feather. So what we're going to do, unscrew our cap, and we're going to put little dobs along the edge of the feather. Now what we're going to do this for is so we don't get too much excess glue. Little dobs, little blobs all the way along. Once we put our little blobs all the way along our feather, see if we can get a side angle, there we go, you can see the little blobs there. We run our glue stick along the edge without squeezing and it will spread that glue out, and that will be more than enough to hold your feather on. Simply slide it into the clamp and push down. Hold for about 5 seconds, leave the clamp on there and repeat till all 3 feathers are done. The last feather's on now, so our arrow should be complete. Take that off, take it out of the fletching jig, and there we have it. Our cock feather out to the side. One really cool point about knocks that a lot of people don't know, if you can see that little rise up on the end of the knock, it's on almost every single knock I've ever had. This is actually to tell you the direction of your cock feather, so you don't have to look at it when you're drawing it out of your quiver to go hunting. This will save you a lot of time and effort. So always make sure that that little rise, that little bump, is on the same side as your cock feather, and that way you'll know which way to put on your bow without even looking at your arrow. Running along the whole shaft, we have a very nice varnish finish. I like to number my arrows with a date and stuff. coming all the way to the end with the bodkin point. They're very, very nice arrows to make, and they're a lot of fun doing it. These will shoot really well. I'm going to take these out and just use these on traditional shoot days as something a bit different. That's the end of our traditional arrow build. This is something a little bit different and a different way of doing things. They look great in the end, they work really well. If you put a little bit of time and effort into it, you can have a really great budget arrow build, and you can do it on a nice rainy day like today and stay entertained. So thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. Remember to give that like button a hit, share the video around, and check out the Archer's Aim Facebook page. Everything's linked in the description below, including that home arrow spine tester build. It's a really handy tool to have, especially if you're making traditional arrows on a regular basis. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time, guys.